So, good morning, Honourable Minister, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a pleasure to be here today to address you and give you a view of what the CFATF, it's much easier to say than our longer name. And yes, we are an alphabet soup in terms of AML, CFT, and CPF, which means anti-money laundering, countering financing of terrorism, and countering proliferation financing. So, while there is a slight difference or variance in terms of the presentation's names, I will also provide an update on where we are with the 40 recommendations as a region. So we take a look at the CFATF in general, the mutual evaluation process, the role and functions of the Secretariat, and the elements for successful engagement. So, right here in Jamaica in 1992, last year was our 30th anniversary. The CFATF started with the Kingston Declaration and a few countries signing the Kingston Declaration in Jamaica to form the CFATF. At that point in time, Trinidad and Tobago decided to take the lead in terms of hosting the Secretariat, and the Secretariat has remained in Trinidad and Tobago since that time. Following the formation, the CFATF developed its own 19 recommendations, which have been put in abeyance. So now the FATF is the standard setter, and they alone set the recommendations. I'd like, however, for those of you who like to go back and look at these things, to say that there was a recommendation 5 of the CFATF recommendations, which talked about money gained from corruption through public service. And so before this FATF actually had a recommendation for PEPs, the CFATF originally had one that would cover those types of circumstances. We have a CFATF Memorandum of Understanding that has been signed by all of our members, and of course our primary function is to conduct mutual evaluations and provide technical assistance and training as it relates to money laundering, terrorist financing, proliferation financing. Most recently, the more important focus has been on virtual assets and virtual asset service providers. And notice I didn't say VASPs, which is what it's called. And also, of course, on beneficial ownership, which is a big thing at this point in time. So this is the CFATF structure, which is the Council of Ministers, and it's headed by ministers of our member countries. There's a steering group, which is a smaller functional group consisting of 13 countries, 12 are CFATF members, and there's one COSAN, and COSAN means Cooperating and Supporting Nation. The current COSAN representative on the steering group is the United Kingdom. We have the plenary of technical officials, and they are the officials that listen to the mutual evaluation reports and actually approve them along with the follow-up reports, which are also part of the mutual evaluation process. Then we have working groups, the heads of FIU, risk trends and methods, working group on FATF issues, and also the ICRG, CFATF ICRG. And of course, there's the Secretariat, and we're at ground zero, and we carry out all the work that's required by the global network and by our members. So just some quick facts. I think I've mentioned them. 30th anniversary, total of 24 members, and you can see how the membership is spread there. The official languages are still English and Spanish, and the CFATF is considered an FATF-style regional body, or FSRB. So this is the mutual evaluation process, and you would see that it starts with a desk-based preparation that looks at the risk context and of the jurisdiction and also effectiveness. So the 4th round mutual evaluation process, which all our countries are in at this point in time, is a combination of technical compliance and effectiveness. So you would have heard the Honourable Minister this morning talk about 33 recommendations rated COLC, that's technical compliance. For effectiveness, the results were not that good. Jamaica, as I recall, got 1 substantial rating in immediate outcome 8, and that's because we pressed them in terms of the cash confiscation and seizures that they had at that point in time. Also, as a result of Jamaica's results, they were put in enhanced follow-up, which meant that they had to report more frequently on addressing their deficiencies, and they also met the prioritization criteria of the FATF, which put them into the FATF ICRG process, so that Jamaica, as indicated this morning by the Minister, is grey listed. With the grey listing came an automatic blacklisting by the European Union, which means that the European Union now asks its member countries to place enhanced due diligence on transactions coming from Jamaica, as well as the other CFATF members who are all in the FATF ICRG process. There's an on-site, which it says interviews and inspections means that we go to the FIU, so the FID would have been visited. We would have visited at that point in time the FSC, the Bank of Jamaica, the regulatory authorities. We would have also visited some private sector entities and asked questions to ensure that they were complying with the FATF standards. After the initial findings are made and presented to the jurisdiction at the end of the process, then the country gets an opportunity after each draft of the report, first and second drafts, to make comments. And so it's a to and fro between the country and the assessors and the Secretariat. As the word mutual says, it is a collaboration. It requires collaboration at all levels. A mutual evaluation should be considered an all-of-country approach. Everyone is on board. It's not about a particular sector. So if your financial sector is doing great, but your DNFBP sector is doing poorly, then you're going to be at the lowest rung, which is where your DNFBP sector is. So as Professor Ali indicated, it is really not the time to be in silos. It's never the time to be in silos, but particularly for the mutual evaluation process, it requires everyone to work together. At the conclusion, you have a desk-based preparation of the mutual evaluation report and then its presentation at plenary. So here's a little picture of a presentation of a mutual evaluation report at a CFATF plenary, and we also have the brand new, proud to say, mutual evaluation report of Suriname, which was recently approved for publication, having passed the FATF's global quality and consistency process. And I should say that this process, the whole mutual evaluation process and the global oversight through the quality and consistency process involves 205 countries. So essentially, when your report is put out there, it is sent to 205 countries. When your follow-up report for re-rating, which Jamaica has done to have moved from 27 recommendations rated C or LC to 33 recommendations, it would have gone out to 205 countries, of course Jamaica included, to have a look at it and to agree as to what the progress is that's being made. So it's really a very global process where everyone is aware of what is going on in your jurisdiction. So the role of the CFATF in mutual evaluations, as I said, we are signatories, and as such, countries have agreed to be assessed in the mutual evaluation program. And it's essentially ensuring that the standards as set by the FATF are being effectively implemented by each of the member countries. So as the executing arm of the CFATF, the Secretariat ensures that the whole process works from the scheduling of the mutual evaluations to the present preparation of the report, the choice of the assessors for each jurisdiction, and the presentation of the final report at plenary, and the ongoing discussions that occur between the assessors and the country. Now, the country doesn't get to talk to the assessors directly. That comes through the Secretariat. Similarly, the assessors speak through the Secretariat to the countries. So in terms of the role as stated in the CFATF procedures, we provide support for the assessment team and the assessed country. So I know some of you who would have attended plenary would note that the Secretariat sits with the assessment team, and that's because they're there to guide them, but they're also there to guide the country, even though they may not be sitting at the same table with the country. So basically, we are there to ensure that the process moves as it's supposed to move. The focus, of course, is on the quality and consistency of the mutual evaluation report and ensuring that the assessors do a proper analysis. Most countries, all countries I would say, are focused on the grades they get, whether they got a largely compliant, non-compliant, partially compliant, whether they are effective, whether it's high, substantive, medium, or low. While that is important, what is more important are what are the recommended actions being suggested by the assessors. Because as Jamaica and those involved in the follow-up process and the ICRG process now can tell you, that is what is important. Because now that tells the country what it needs to do after the mutual evaluation process to become effective. And the FATF holds the country to that. The CFATF holds the country to that. So if you have recommended actions in there that made no sense or is not something that the country can do within its legal framework, before the report is approved, this is the time to say so and to have that addressed. So also some of the other functions ensure that the assessors and assessed countries have access to relevant and accurate documentation, that statistics and legislation are provided and are properly cited. In the region, we have an issue with statistics. Everybody counts things differently. So you would find that law enforcement may count a case as one case. Then another arm of law enforcement, if there are 10 defendants, may count it as 10 cases. And so it's something that we need to correct in order to tell a better story when statistics are submitted. We try very hard to make sure that the countries submit information well in advance of the on-site. We have had a situation where, following an on-site, a country submitted over 500 documents post-on-site. And that is within 2 days of the assessment team leaving the jurisdiction. Now, there's no way the assessment team can read 500 documents and get all that information. So again, it's to put the information up front, state your case. The burden of proving that you are compliant or effective is on the jurisdiction. The jurisdiction has the burden of proof. So you have to make sure that you give everything in the kitchen sink to the assessors. And I'm saying this, that although Jamaica has had its 4th round assessment, it's in the follow-up process, it's in the ICRG process, I can tell you that the 5th round of assessments will begin in the 1st quarter of 2026, which means by 2027, Jamaica is going to be up to bat again. When you look at the period under which you look at compliance and effectiveness, it's 5 years prior to that. It would mean that 2022, which has just ended, is one of Jamaica's years that would be under review. 2023, you now have the opportunity to do great stuff. But you need to look at it like that because it means that you're already within that window where you have to show statistics of how well you're complying and how effective you are. So you need to think of it that way and start the work from now. 2027 is not far away. So for an assessment that starts in 2027, I would tell you that the Secretariat is going to start working on it from 2026. So the 2026 assessments, we start working on them in 2025. So I've told Trinidad and Tobago this, they'll be the first up in the 1st quarter of 2026, that they've already lost 2021. In other words, whatever is there, that's what it is. They've lost 2022. That's 2 of their 5 years have gone. So Jamaica, you're in a slightly better position. You've just lost 2022. In other words, you can't manufacture what didn't happen, what didn't work. But it's to make sure that the years between 2023 until you're on site in 2027 are as effective as possible. So in executing these functions, the Secretariat engages in the following. We assess member countries to enhance their AML, help them to enhance their AML CFT framework, and that is by either providing them training or finding donors who provide them relevant training based on the training needs that they have. So we send out these matrices every year. We have a donors forum, and we say, please tell us where you need training. And then we try to provide the training. I mentioned the COSANs, they're the cooperating and supporting nations. We have 7 COSANs in the FATF, and the COSANs provide technical assistance and training. or they provide funds for technical assistance and training. They're the United States of America, the United Kingdom, Spain, Canada, Mexico, and the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and France. So there are 7 of them. Continuous monitoring and review of members' countries' compliance with their outstanding deficiencies based on the results of their mutual evaluation, and of course, training, assessor training, pre-assessment training, FATF recommendations training, and we have now added pre-plenary training, which is training that we give to the countries before the plenary so that they can understand how the process works and that it works more efficiently. At a more granular level, the Secretariat, as I mentioned, develops the mutual evaluation reports, gets the assessors that are most suitable for the jurisdiction in terms of expertise, outreach to members to ensure that they provide assessors that are qualified, and also outreach to our COSANs, the FATF members, the FATF observers to get reviewers for the process, because that's also part of the mutual evaluation process. Post-evaluations, countries are given reporting deadlines in terms of their follow-up. So as I said, it doesn't end at the mutual evaluation. Depending on your results, you either end up in regular follow-up or enhanced follow-up. We have had 16 countries whose reports have been presented to plenary for approval and approved. Unfortunately, Venezuela's report, which was approved at our November plenary in Cayman Islands 2022, failed the post-quality and consistency test, and so we'd have some more work to do on that. But only 2 countries out of the 16 countries have been placed in regular follow-up. That's Bermuda and Aruba. All other countries have been placed in enhanced follow-up, which means they're on a cycle of reporting to plenary every year as to how they've been addressing their deficiencies. The re-rating process, as noted earlier and by the Minister, is what has allowed Jamaica to go from 27 LC and C ratings to 33 C and LC ratings. I'm also proud to say we have 2 countries, Cayman Islands and the Bahamas, who have all 40 recommendations rated compliant or largely compliant. And they are probably 2 of 5 or 6 countries in the world out of the 205 global networks. So it's really a good achievement. And of course, Jamaica is well on their way towards doing that. So this is just to touch a bit on the ICRG process, which is also part of the mutual evaluation process. So based on the results and based on meeting a prioritization criteria, which is 500 billion in financial sector assets, then a country would be gray listed by the FATF. And so Jamaica is within that process. It's a confidential process, but I can say that unfortunately, the SSL matter would not have helped in terms of the optics. So it's extremely wrong timing for that, but we will deal with it. The positives coming out of that is that Jamaica has taken immediate action. It has used the laws that it has in place to take measures to deal with the fraud and, of course, to investigate and whatever else comes with the process in terms of prosecution, etc. So it shows, the positive is that it shows that there is a framework in place to counter money laundering and fraud in these crimes, and that is working because action has been taken. And that is how we will present it to the joint group when we meet with them later on this year. To assist members with the process, we have, of course, ongoing meetings. So before Jamaica has its face-to-face meeting with the joint group, we have meetings with them to advise them as to what measures they could take and how to proceed. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. I saw the card at the back, so I speeded up a bit. So I see that I have a few minutes, or either that or I can end at this point in time, but thank you very much, and thanks for your attention. All I could say is, please, the takeaway from this is the mutual evaluation process is something that's not going to go away. It's very resource intensive. Jamaica, and we made this point, instead of spending time dealing with the 5th round, which is coming up, has to meet these deficiencies. So it's important that when you go to your next round, as you see the deficiencies being discussed, because the whole process takes 14 to 18 months, the whole mutual evaluation process, you start working on them rather than haggling over grades. Look at the areas that the assessors are saying that there are deficiencies and start working on them. So if the results are that you don't do as well and you're going to be put into a process like ICRG, you would have corrected most of the deficiencies by the time that has come up. I'd also like to say that the 5th round is going to focus primarily on effectiveness. The expectation is that countries would have all their ducks in a row in terms of the legislation, and like the Honorable Minister said, this is what they're looking at: implementation, how well you're doing implementation, and what the results are. So please continue to work together. Where you're not working together, start to do so, because that is what is important. It's noted from the very beginning when we get a technical compliance questionnaire and we see inconsistencies before we even come to the jurisdiction. We know that there's a lack of cooperation, because if the answers don't gel as persons talking about one whole system, we know that there are parties not speaking to each other. I can also tell you that behind the veil and inside the room, there are persons who come and think it's their opportunity to say all that they think is wrong and going wrong. There are persons who come and the supervisor has done their best to try and give them training, and you go to the supervisor and the supervisor says, we've given them AML CFC training, we see them this often. And then you go to the regulated entities, and that's for you private sector people, and you look at the assessors and you say, when last did you see your supervisors? Them? We don't see them. Or the alternative is, we have recently started seeing them, but it's because you all come in. That's why they did that. So to avoid those types of things, and these are real things I'm saying, I'm not making them up, it's to make sure, again, as Professor Ali and as the whole topic of this conference is, to continue the collaboration. That's the only way you're going to make sure that everyone is on the same page going forward, because this is an all-of-country approach. This is about Jamaica. As the Honorable Minister said, it's not about you individually. So when you don't do your job and you don't cooperate, you don't offend any singular person, you affect Jamaica. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.